Dan Rubenstein, we recorded an episode earlier today with our friend Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports, The Athletic, the Audible podcast. We talked ad nauseum about this most recent coaching carousel cycle. Naturally, as these things go in all forms of on-demand audio, right after we hit stop, we have breaking news.
Yes, we do.
And it's a big one. There had been rumors floating around on the dark web for a couple weeks.
The dark web, yeah.
Unsubstantiated.
No.
But this was out there that something might be coming. We got news a little bit ago that Sherrone Moore at Michigan has been fired with cause. Our friends Pete Thamel, Dan Wetzel, Adam Schefter over at ESPN.com reporting that Michigan is firing Sherrone Moore for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member.
Yeah.
That is all we have at present. As some have pointed out, it's very rare that you get that level of specificity when news immediately breaks of a coach's firing. So there's been obviously some sort of investigation. The university clearly felt comfortable labeling it as such. This, of course, comes on the heels of a very active coaching carousel cycle. We talked earlier about all of the movement across college football, what with Lane Kiffin, Matt Campbell, Bob Chesney. I mean, there have been a bunch of names moving around. With Sherrone Moore being relieved of command, in effect, this sort of resets the coaching carousel. It kicks off a phase 2 of sorts because we can go through some of the names that are being attached to this new opening. They are all very big names. Michigan is a very big place, Dan.
Yeah.
So if you're a college football fan, if you have been watching from afar as the coaching carousel has spun round and round, my hunch is that there is a lot more to come. What are your thoughts here? This is a big one.
This is very big, obviously, has come out of nowhere in terms of whether it was today, whether it was stuff that's been floating out there. Obviously, a mixed bag in terms of on-field results, has recruited somewhat well. I mean, the actual, concerning thing here is the reasoning why Sherrone Moore was relieved of his job, an inappropriate relationship. We don't know exactly what that means.
No.
Beyond, look, if the head coach is having an affair with a staff member, obviously that goes against the rules in place, given power dynamics and the expectation of somebody who is a boss. And so you can understand why that is a reality in basically every single office situation, employment situation. So first and foremost, obviously, Sherrone Moore did not lead a good program example from his actions. That's barely English, and I apologize. I'm trying to watch my words carefully here. But he failed. He failed to lead Michigan properly, and this is why we are here. So, huge job and huge opportunity. Timing is a little bit less than ideal, given that we just saw the carousel spin and we saw various coaches either make moves or coordinators make moves, or coaches who were sort of receiving interest get bumps and extensions in salaries. We are weirdly at December 10th and it feeling like we're late in the process. And so Michigan named Biff Poggi, who, was an assistant head coach under both Sherrone Moore last season after not working out at Charlotte. And he was in the Jim Harbaugh time as well, a couple of different times in the Jim Harbaugh era. So he will be coaching them in the bowl game, correct?
Correct.
And then from there, we don't know exactly. You're going to mention some candidates that have been tossed around, but that's kind of all we know right now in terms of the facts laid out in front of us.
Quote, this conduct constitutes a clear violation of university policy, and UM maintains zero tolerance for such behavior. That is from Athletic Director Ward Manuel, who issued a statement on Wednesday. Clearly, the timing of this, as you alluded, is not ideal. A bunch of coaches are spoken for with new contract extensions, although I suppose Michigan will do whatever it can, essentially to empty the clip to make sure they have someone good in place. The timing of this is interesting given the fact that A, we just had a bunch of coach movement not too long ago. B, just a week ago was early signing day, which is, I'm sure, going to play a larger part in this whole operation now,
Yeah.
given there is uncertainty. And I think on top of that, the extra layer, and part of why there had been building enthusiasm for Michigan, granted, it wasn't all in place this year, but exciting quarterback in Bryce Underwood, a relatively young team. They're still sort of building back up under the new coach after Harbaugh left. And so there's a lot of reason, I think, to be optimistic about this program, but there is definitely this now hanging over the Michigan Wolverines. Some of the names that were reported right away from our friend Pete Nakos over at On3, some are obvious, some are not. All of them are relatively big, which is why I think this could be one of those things. I mean, the coaching carousel has become something of a spectator sport among college football fans. We have it every year around this time. And we quite literally interviewed Bruce earlier today. And we asked him, do you think it's done spinning? And he said, I don't know, but it's only December 10th, which means it's early and stuff always breaks. Well, a few hours after the fact, we get this news coming across the wire. Among the names that Pete Nakos reports, Kalen DeBoer, current head coach, playoff bound head coach at Alabama.
Yep.
Brian Kelly, now former LSU coach, former Notre Dame coach.
Coached at Grand Valley State in the state, yeah.
Yep, Cincinnati, was at Central Michigan, so he's familiar with this general region. Lincoln Riley, whose name has come up a couple times attached to other openings around college football. Jesse Minter, another guy on the West Coast, though not in college. He followed Jim Harbaugh out into the NFL. He's currently the DC for the LA Chargers. Eli Drinkwitz, who just signed an extension of sorts. Jed Fish out at Washington, whose name I expected to be a little bit more active, if I'm being honest.
But he's connected to this because he also was an assistant at Michigan.
Correct.
So there are ties in Ann Arbor.
Correct.
If you remember going back to like Warring Graphics from a few years ago involving Jed Fish. Yeah.
And the last one that Pete lists here is Clark Lee, who also just re-upped with Vanderbilt. But Clark Lee is a guy who obviously has had a lot of success. And there is an open question about if and when at some point he would bolt from Vandy to go to what is perceived a bigger and better job. So those are some heavy hitters, right? If any of those names were to move, it would trigger its own domino effect of sorts and clearly make for very interesting fodder in the coaching world. The name that everybody brought out first, I will say, is DeBoer.
Right.
Because Kalen DeBoer is from South Dakota. Kalen DeBoer is coached generally in this part of the country. Kalen DeBoer has obviously been very successful in the time that he was a head coach at Fresno, then most recently at Washington before coming over to Alabama, a now two-time playoff coach, to say the least, who has a good track record for building offenses. There have been rumors about him being attached to some other positions that were open this cycle, most notably Penn State.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer, I think, would be an enormous hire if you were able to pry him away from Alabama. Now, it wasn't all that long ago. He just said via a press conference that he's happy. We've never been happier here. We're thrilled to be part of this community, to be building forward. I think they all say the normal coach speak thing, but it seemed as though just a week ago he had put some of these rumors to bed, but now he's coming up attached potentially to this Michigan opening.
Yeah. I don't have buyout numbers in front of me. Obviously, Kalen DeBoer, a lot of his footprint is in the northern part of the country, but has coached everywhere at this point. Most recently, when he was in the Big Ten, I guess he was the offensive coordinator at Indiana. Has since gone, obviously, Fresno State, Washington, Bama. Hefty buyout, as I'm sure a lot of these guys that you have mentioned. Clark Lee just signed a new deal. Jesse Minter is an assistant in the NFL, so I can't imagine his buyout is substantial. Has experience, obviously, with Michigan, and I think I want to say it was Vanderbilt for a year before that. So there's more Vanderbilt connection, and there was, I think, Ravens connection along with Mike McDonald, who's now the Seahawks head coach. It's a huge job. Those are huge names. It's a huge job. I also want to say the leadership might, this is not my expertise, but I know Santa Ono attempted to leave the University of Florida, the Michigan president. I think they have an interim president at the moment, so correct me if I'm wrong there, but I don't know where the school leadership is at the moment. Obviously, Ward Manuel's still there. He was the one who issued this release. So, things a little bit in flux behind the scenes. Curious to see whether or not they do a full year with Poggi. look, the priority here now is going to be finding a long-term answer. And if you can't find a long-term answer right now, it's trying to keep this roster together, this recruiting class that signed, I don't know, 7 days ago.
Yeah, they were the 11th overall recruiting class,
Yep.
according to our friends over at 24/7. 2 5-stars, 12 4-stars, 12 3-stars. It was a good class
Mm-hmm.
by all accounts. So that is where my mind goes first, especially when something like this pops up so late in the coaching cycle, so late in the recruiting cycle. What are the impacts going to be from this? Of course, a coach leaves. It kind of opens the floodgates for players to make a switch if they see it necessary. I think if
Right.
you're Michigan, you obviously want to try and get a guy in place ASAP. This is a different situation altogether than what we saw happen at, say, Penn State, where the pressure was ratcheting up because they didn't have a guy. They fired James Franklin early so they could get a head start on the coaching search.
Right.
And they ended up being one of the last to name a guy. They sort of expected when they made a move like that mid-season that the recruiting class, that much of the current roster was going to go up in smoke. That was an expectation when you make a move like that. You're naive to think otherwise. But now, given the timing of this one for Michigan, you make a move this late in the recruiting and coaching cycle, you want to try and keep it together. You just got some of these guys to sign. You want to try and keep this together as best you can, especially the guys you're excited about.
Right.
So time is of the essence to try and go out there and make a move as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah, you think about some of the names who were in discussion last time. Lance Leipold, when Sherrone
Yeah.
Moore was named, he had earned the head coaching job after Jim Harbaugh left. Yeah, I think this, along with any other job, Michigan is obviously an enormous job. They can't think short term. They can't hire somebody just because they want to keep things together. That's what they did with Sherrone Moore. Seemed to work for a year.
Yeah.
This year was, even on the fields, pretty up and down, though obviously they did win a chunk of games, lost the Ohio State game, which obviously sits terribly with Michigan fans. But in terms of thinking long term, find the guy for 8 years, not find the guy who can keep Bryce Underwood. And Bryce Underwood's a big deal. There are big deal young players on this roster. They're a big deal I think they have like the number one edge rusher, the number one running back, signed at the moment. We'll see what happens. But this has to be a long-term decision. So for a place like Michigan, they're going to have to spend, Ty. They're going to,
I mean, especially this late in the game.
Yeah.
And doubly so if you're going to go after a guy who just hired an extension or who just signed an extension, if you want to hire one of those guys away, because there's going to be a hefty buyout attached to it. I'm seeing Matt Zenitz from over at CBS Sports reporting that it was mostly a normal day today at Michigan until about 20 after 4. The team was even set to practice tonight, but at that point, team staffers were abruptly called in for a meeting, at which point they were told that Sherrone Moore had been fired. The team was then told afterwards. So this certainly is going to come as something of a shock for a team that presumably was getting ready for a bowl game. There will be much, much more to follow on this front with Sherrone Moore. At time of recording right now, we just don't have a whole lot to go on other than to say that this has happened, that some of the rumors that had been floating around out there apparently came true, and we're going to have a second wave in the coaching carousel. This might be arguably one of the, if not the biggest jobs in college sports. Michigan's a huge brand.
Enormous. Yeah.
It's the winningest program in college football history. This is a job that is going to be much sought after. So to have this one pop up this late in the cycle, though it's probably not unprecedented in the history of coaching searches, it is definitely going to be a new wrinkle on what was already a very, very active coaching carousel.
Agree. And I'm very curious to see the direction they go in. This is where Michigan sits right now, obviously winning a recent national championship and having 2-3 excellent years to end the Jim Harbaugh era. Michigan now sits in a much more difficult Big Ten than even where it was 2-3 years ago, right? With Indiana peaking the way that they are as the number one team in America. I'm going to let that sink in for just another moment. Everybody in the Big Ten now has to go through Indiana in order to prove anything. Ohio State is a killer. Oregon's a killer. Penn State has the potential to be excellent. We'll see, but it's a new coach. We'll see how long that takes to get up and running. I wonder if Matt Campbell's like, should I have waited a week? Should I have
If you're James
just
Franklin, should I have waited a couple weeks?
I don't think Michigan was hiring James Franklin. I think James Franklin would have loved the opportunity to speak to Michigan, perhaps.
I mean, this truly, though, this opens up an entirely new can of worms, especially among some coaches who have just left to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
We talked with Bruce Feldman at length about Lane Kiffin.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if Kalen DeBoer decides to go to Michigan with Lane Kiffin just having signed on with LSU?
Right.
Would Alabama make a move for Lane Kiffin? Like, I don't know, but I think this opens up a bunch of just off the wall possibilities that normally would just be relegated to message boards,
right,
and dark corners of the internet that nobody takes seriously. However, this late in the game, time is of the essence to retain what you have. We've gotten questions as we're doing this live. We've gotten questions that have come in our chat about, well, what happens to Bryce Underwood?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to some of the big names that Michigan was excited about?
What's the language in Bryce Underwood's deal specifically to get out of that deal? Because a lot of money means a lot of clauses as well.
So look, we're just sort of shooting from the hip here. We got this news the way everybody got this news. It is something that we'll keep very close tabs on here over the next couple days and weeks. For sure, it's going to be the biggest story in and around the world of college football. Thankfully for the playoff committee and for the Notre Dames of the world and for some other entities in college football that were very much front stage center in the current news cycle, that all now gets pushed to the back burner with the Michigan job coming open. As we find out more, we will do our best to stay on top of it. This is the nature of on-demand audio. When you don't always get things when you want them, it doesn't always fit neatly into a nice little box, but keep it right here. Hit follow, hit subscribe. We'll do our part to make sure that you're in the know as news becomes available.
Any other thoughts? Any other places your brain is wandering with regard to this Michigan job with names? And just like you go through the names right now and you're either paying a ton to a guy like Clark Lee, who just got an extension or something, who, by the way, like a lot of these guys have made very clear indications, not that we're going to like say college football coaches are like the most trustworthy people when it comes to what they say. But a lot of these guys have like really planted the flag. Like what Clark Lee has said, and he felt kind of disrespected reportedly until he got that extension. Dan Lanning has planted the flag. Sark has like gone on and on about, when the Titans rumors came up, that a lot of the names of guys, Eli Drinkwitz was just, fawning over how happy he was at Mizzou after he signed his extension, right? That it puts a lot of these guys in a bad position, even if they would be thrilled to interview and take over this Michigan job. Now, again, these are short-term optics. They do follow people around. I just don't know at this point, like to your point, like who that name is, who is willing to say, and maybe it is Kalen DeBoer, right? There's a buyout, a pretty hefty one in place, but he's somebody who has not been afraid of leaving after a couple of years. Right? Left a couple of years at Fresno, left a couple of years at Washington. Now we're a couple of years into his Alabama time. Jed Fish the same way, kind of 2 years everywhere he goes, year or two everywhere he goes.
That's right.
And so there's a lot of nomadic dudes out there as well who are willing to listen, though you could argue for both of those jobs, Washington and Alabama, to varying degrees, different kind of destination. Alabama is like top of the top in this sport. Washington is very good, has been a playoff team, but on a different level. But in the Big Ten. I don't know. I don't know who that guy is, but whoever that guy is, whether it's somebody who is getting back channeled to right now, potentially for next year, you can't even include Lane Kiffin in this conversation, right?
No,
any outcome is on the table with Lane Kiffin, right? But yeah, the idea of somebody like DeBoer moving and having that Alabama domino out there is pretty wild.
That would be kind of nuts.
Or
that really would.
Here's tinfoil, Dan. Kalani Sitake backs out last minute because he finds out Michigan might open.
He better not, man. He better not. Not after all that.
Past any of these guys, right? That like Kalani Sitake's taking the Michigan job tomorrow because he backs out thinking this Michigan job might. Like these guys, if we had heard about it a couple weeks ago, we were one of the last people to know.
We were one of the last. Yeah. If we had an inkling,
right.
My hunch is that the people who could be up for this already knew about it. One other name that I'm seeing, by the way, over at ESPN.com, Max Olson, Adam Rittenberg, lists Manny Diaz here
Interesting.
as a potential. I don't know if that would excite the fan base after a 5-loss season, albeit a conference championship season for the Duke Blue Devils. Manny Diaz, of course, known for his defense. Not so much this year, but most years Manny Diaz is quite good at that. For what it's worth, they also list Kalen DeBoer at the top of their 5 candidates for the job. So Kalen DeBoer's name's going to come up, I think, in accordance with this one
Yep.
until he puts it to bed, if he puts it to bed at all, as Alabama gets ready for its playoff matchup in about a week. So a lot going on there. There will be further distractions. They've also got Jesse Minter in here, some of the same names, Jed Fish.
Have you
as
seen
might
Brent
expect.
Key's name anywhere?
I have not. No. And Brent Key, I believe, just signed an extension.
He signed an extension.
Not that necessarily factors into some of these discussions, but have not seen his name linked up to any of these jobs yet.
I just am always curious about a rising name in either the Big 12 or ACC now connected to an SEC or Big 10 job, because you know the financial and stage ceiling is largely going to be higher in those two conferences, fair or not. As for Manny Diaz, right, checks that box also in the ACC. There is like a sort of very Jim Harbaugh vibe about Brent Key to me.
Yes.
I don't know. But Manny Diaz has been at Duke for a couple of years, which is, I guess, an eternity for him. When you leave a job after 3 weeks, 2 years can feel like a long, long time. So there's no obvious connection to me with Manny Diaz in Michigan, but certainly a name that's growing because of his success at Duke. Wow. Just wild. Wild that this pops open. Wild that December 10th is late in the process, given where we've been in previous seasons. I think about all these names that feel like an almost like a pretty good cultural fit, like Kyle Whittingham and stuff, but it doesn't seem like he is long for Salt Lake City, just in terms of like being worn down from the job, not like ready to move on to somewhere else. I wouldn't even joke about Urban Meyer. It's a waste of everybody's breath
Oh
at
my
this point.
gosh.
Yeah, I mean,
Look,
I think they should just go Biff for a year and really figure it out. I don't know. That's my
Biff
immediate
Poggi for a year and then see what they can do. I mean,
Right.
that's probably on the table. He's somebody who at least has head coaching experience, has Michigan, relatively recent, successful Michigan experience that he could fall back on in a pinch. I don't think that's the worst fallback plan,
Right.
relatively speaking. But clearly, if you're a Michigan fan, I don't think that's the answer that you're looking for. I think you're looking for somebody that's going to excite the fan base. It's just really hard this late in the game. It wouldn't surprise me if we start hearing about inquiries out to Marcus Freeman. It sounds as though Marcus Freeman's agents have not necessarily put to bed the rumors that he could be a candidate for some of these positions.
Has he signed anything new recently? Or just roll
Not
over?
that I'm aware of. I know Pete Bavacqua, the Notre Dame athletic director, made some comments in his now maligned press conference from yesterday about how they value Marcus Freeman, and Marcus Freeman knows how much they value him, and they will do whatever humanly
Right.
possible to make sure that they keep him in South Bend. Look, this isn't to say that Marcus Freeman is going to take the Michigan job. This is to say, though, that pretty much everybody with a high-profile head coaching opening, and that includes college and the NFL, they are all fielding just general interest from Marcus Freeman. They want to know if that's something he'd be interested in, and his agents haven't gone above and beyond putting any of those rumors to bed. I think they
Sure.
like having it out there for whatever reason. I guess they could use it as leverage if they want to in a contract negotiation. A lot of coaches do that. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean anything, frankly, but it wouldn't surprise me if we start hearing his name as just a possibility as well, because it is a big opening, and you would expect that they're going to go out after the very biggest and best.
Yeah. I tend to think, Notre Dame's obviously a huge job, but I tend to think a high-profile former Ohio State player is likely not gonna take the Michigan head
I
coaching job.
tend to agree with you.
I don't I
Tend to agree with you, but I'm just,
Look, if Marcus Freeman went to Texas Tech, if Marcus Freeman went to Minnesota and he's succeeding at Notre Dame, I have it hard to believe he would go to Michigan. You throw in the extra layer of succeeding as a
I'm with
player at
you.
Ohio State.
Listen, I'm with you. I'm
Unbelievable.
totally with you. But I expect that will be a name that we will hear. It also wouldn't surprise me if we hear a name like Kenny Dillingham.
Sure.
Dillingham is another one of these guys that was sought after by nearly everybody with a coaching opening. And though he seems relatively happy in Tempe, he went to school there, he's got family there. He's talked at length about, his sister and his mother living down the road. So he's got everything he could possibly want in Tempe, and I'm sure they're thrilled to have him. But maybe with Sam Levitt leaving or presumed to be leaving via the transfer portal in a couple weeks, maybe with the added motivation of going to a place that is absolutely enormous, relatively speaking, that could be an interesting name that I could see popping up. But at this point in time, we just got this news about an hour ago. You and I are just throwing names against the wall. We're kind of leaning on the reporting that others have done. So
Right.
we will do our part here again to keep everybody up to speed. But I think that's it for now. Sherrone Moore, again, fired with cause from the University of Michigan. It is a bombshell on December the 10th. It is a bombshell really no matter when this news breaks, but the fact that it's this late in the cycle is going to make things damn interesting now as we round the corner into the postseason, as we round the corner into the playoff, the transfer portal, a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to, I think, take part now as a result of this. Never a dull moment in the world of college football.
Never a dull moment. I don't want to look at this from a like soap opera gossipy point of view. I am curious to how the timeline looks with all of this. When Michigan found out, when it began investigating, what the investigation turned up, like, did they sit on this? Like, if Michigan destroys Ohio State, if you're going to be like a conspiracy theorist, a week and a half ago or whatever, how does this play? Like, I'm very curious about just from a timeline perspective, what this all looks like.
That's about all we got. Again, that's the news of the day. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe if you have yet to do so.
Yeah.
We'll do whatever we can to stay on top of this, but the coaching carousel is not done quite yet. There is a big opening. What will be to follow, that remains to be seen. For that guy over there, Dan, for myself over here, Ty, as always, stay solid.
Peace.